Hey, before you fully settle into this moment, before your mind tries to pick up where it left off today, before any thought starts pulling you back into yesterday or pushing you into tomorrow, just stay here, just for a little while longer, because this is not a moment to rush through, and it is not a moment to fix anything in your life. It is simply a moment to be still enough to feel that you are already here, already breathing, already carried by a grace you don't have to earn tonight. And I know, maybe your day didn't feel light. Maybe it felt like too much noise, too many responsibilities, too many emotions that you had to quietly manage while still showing up for everything and everyone around you. And now that everything is finally quiet outside, it feels like everything inside has become louder. Thoughts replaying, memories resurfacing, worries trying to speak all at once. As if your mind is trying to use this silence to solve everything at the same time. But you don't have to follow all of that tonight. Because tonight is not asking you to solve your life. Tonight is not asking you to understand every delay, every unanswered prayer, every uncertain direction. Tonight is simply inviting you into something softer, something quieter, something your soul has been needing far longer than you've realized. Rest. Not the kind of rest that comes from finishing everything, but the kind of rest that comes from finally allowing yourself to stop carrying everything in your mind at once. And maybe, just maybe, you've been strong in ways no one really sees, holding things together when your heart felt heavy, answering people when you yourself felt like you needed someone to listen, smiling through moments where your inner world was asking for pause, and slowly, without noticing, you started becoming used to carrying more than you were ever meant to carry alone. But even now, right in this quiet space, there is something gentle reaching toward you, not to correct you, not inside every thought that shows up. You can simply notice them and let them pass like distant sounds that don't need your response anymore. Because there is something your soul is slowly remembering in this moment, something simple but deeply important, that you are not your thoughts, you are not the noise inside your mind, you are not the worries that come and go throughout the day, you are the one who notices them, the one who becomes aware of them, the one who can sit here quietly and still exist even when everything inside is not perfectly silent. And that awareness, even if it feels small, even if it feels subtle, is powerful in a very gentle way, because it creates space between you and the pressure, space between you and the urgency, space between you and the feeling that everything must be solved right now or else something will go wrong. And in that space, something softer begins to enter, something calmer than your thoughts, something steadier than your emotions, something that does not rush you or demand anything from you. And maybe this is what your heart has been needing more than anything else today. Not more answers, not more control, not more effort to fix what feels uncertain, but a moment where you are allowed to simply stop reacting to everything for a while and just breathe without pressure, just exist without carrying the weight of every possibility at once. Because even Jesus never called you into a life of constant inner tension. He never asked you to live in a state of endless mental struggle. He never said you must figure everything out before you are allowed to rest. Instead, he gently invites you into something different, something quieter, something that begins with simply coming to him as you are, not as you think you should be, not as you wish you were, but exactly in this moment, tired, human, and real. And as that truth settles a little deeper inside you, you may start to feel your breathing changing just slightly on its own, not because you are forcing it, but because your system is beginning to recognize safety and stillness again. And in that softness, even the night begins to feel less heavy than it did before. And as your breath continues to slow down in its own natural rhythm, you may begin to notice that this moment is not asking anything from you at all. There is no requirement to perform here, no expectation to solve anything, no pressure to become a better version of yourself before you are allowed to feel calm. You are simply here, and that alone is enough for this moment to hold you gently without conditions. Because so much of life outside this quiet space keeps teaching your mind to stay alert, to stay ready, to keep thinking one step ahead just in case something goes wrong. And without even realizing it, that constant state of readiness can become the background of your entire day. Even when nothing urgent is happening, even when your body is resting, your mind still stays slightly tense, slightly active, slightly prepared for problems that have not even arrived yet. But right here, in this soft silence, nothing is demanding that kind of readiness from you. And maybe that feels unfamiliar at first, because when the mind has been used to carrying pressure for too long, even peace can feel like something strange, like something it is not sure how to trust yet. But slowly, gently, your inner world begins to adjust to this softer rhythm, a rhythm that does not rush, does not push, does not force anything to happen immediately. And in that adjustment, something very subtle begins to open within you, a kind of awareness that you do not have to stay inside every thought that appears. You can let them rise and fall without attaching why. Becoming the worry, you can notice uncertainty without stepping into it completely. And in doing so, you begin to experience a small but meaningful distance from the noise that once felt so close. And in that distance, there is relief. Not because everything has changed outside, but because something inside you is no longer gripping everything so tightly at the same time. And that loosening, even if it is just a little, creates room for something gentler to enter. Something that feels less like effort and more like permission to breathe without analyzing it, permission to rest without earning it, permission to simply exist without carrying the full weight of tomorrow into this moment. And maybe this is where peace begins to feel real again. Not as something far away that you have to reach, but as something quietly present underneath everything you've been holding, waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. And even now, in this very breath, it is already closer than your thoughts are telling you. And as you stay in this gentle awareness a little longer, something even quieter begins to unfold beneath your thoughts, almost like your inner world is slowly stepping back from the constant effort of holding everything together. Because you may not always realize how much energy it takes just to keep your mind on all the time, always thinking, always evaluating, always trying to make sense of things that don't have clear answers yet. And that invisible effort can quietly build up into a kind of exhaustion that doesn't always look dramatic on the outside, but feels heavy on the inside. And maybe that's the kind of tiredness you've been carrying, not just physical tiredness, but a deeper emotional tiredness, the kind that comes from being strong for too long, from holding in emotions when you didn't have space to express them, from continuing your responsibilities even when your inner world felt scattered or overwhelmed. And because life doesn't always pause to notice that kind of exhaustion, you often learn to just keep going, even when a part of you is quietly asking for rest. But here, in this moment, you don't have to keep going in that same way. You don't have to keep managing everything internally. You don't have to keep replaying what happened or preparing for what might happen next. You are allowed to step out of that constant mental effort, even if just for a little while, even if just in this moment of stillness where nothing is asking you to fix anything. And as that permission slowly settles into your awareness, you may notice a subtle shift happening inside you, like the pressure in your mind begins to loosen its grip just slightly. Not because the problems are gone, but because you are no longer holding them with the same intensity. And that small shift alone can begin to change the way everything feels, making space where there was once only tightness, creating calm where there was once only urgency. Because peace doesn't always arrive by changing your circumstances. Sometimes it arrives by changing your relationship with the moment you are already in and right now. In this quiet space, you are beginning to experience that gentle shift from holding everything tightly to allowing things to simply exist without resistance. And in that allowing, your mind slowly learns that it doesn't have to carry everything it wants to stay safe. And as that quiet realization continues to settle within you, you may begin to notice something even more gentle happening underneath the surface of your thoughts. Almost like your inner world is slowly learning how to soften without being forced. Because for so long, your mind may have been operating in a kind of silent survival mode, always scanning, always planning, always trying to stay one step ahead of life just in case something unexpected happens. And even though that way of thinking may have helped you get through difficult moments in the past, it can also leave you feeling like you are never fully able to rest, even when everything around you is still. But here, in this space, nothing is asking you to stay in that state of alertness. Nothing is requiring you to mentally prepare for every possible outcome. Nothing is demanding that you figure everything out before you can feel okay. And as that truth slowly becomes more present in your awareness, you might start to feel a subtle easing in the way your thoughts are moving, like they are no longer rushing as quickly from one worry to another, no longer pulling you so intensely into every what if that appears. And in that easing, there is a quiet kind of relief beginning to form, not because everything has been solved, but because you are no longer standing inside the center of every thought with the same level of intensity. You are beginning to create space to notice without reacting immediately, space to feel without being overwhelmed, space to observe your inner world without becoming trapped in it. And that space, even if it feels small at first, is where a different kind of strength begins to grow, a strength that is calm, steady, and not dependent on control. And maybe this is what your heart has been quietly searching for. Not more pressure to understand everything, not more effort to fix what feels uncertain, but a place where you are allowed to step back from the constant mental noise and simply breathe. Again, a place where you are not required to carry every thought as if it is urgent. A place where your awareness can rest without being pulled in every direction at once. And as you remain here just a little longer, you may begin to sense that peace was never something far away from you. It was simply waiting beneath the layers of overthinking and emotional weight, gently present all along, ready to be felt the moment you stop resisting this moment and allow yourself to be here exactly as you are. And as you continue resting in that softer awareness, something very gentle begins to shift in the background of your emotions, almost like your inner world is finally being given permission to stop bracing for impact. Because when a person has carried stress for a long time, even calm moments can feel unfamiliar at first, like the mind is still waiting for something to go wrong, still waiting for the next responsibility, still waiting for the next emotional demand to appear. But here, In this quiet space, nothing is coming to take your peace away. And slowly, without forcing anything, your system begins to adjust to that truth. The need to constantly anticipate starts to loosen just a little. The pressure to mentally stay ahead of everything begins to soften. And in that softening, you may notice that your thoughts are still present, but they are no longer pulling you with the same intensity. They rise, they pass, and you remain here, not carried away by every single one of them like before. And maybe this is where something important begins to happen inside you. Not a dramatic change, but a quiet shift in how you relate to your inner world. You begin to realize that you don't have to engage with every thought you have. You don't have to answer every worry immediately. You don't have to mentally solve every uncertainty just to feel safe. There is a different way of being here, one where thoughts can exist without control, and you can still remain grounded beneath them. And in that realization, a deeper sense of space starts to open up within you. Space to breathe without urgency. Space to feel without judgment. Space to simply be present without constantly analyzing what comes next. And that space is not empty in a cold way. It is peaceful in a very quiet, steady way, like your inner world is finally exhaling after holding tension for too long. And maybe, just maybe, this is what your soul has been needing all along tonight. Not more effort, not more answers, not more pressure to fix anything immediately, but this simple experience of allowing yourself to slow down enough to notice that even in the middle of everything unresolved, you are still safe enough in this moment to rest. And as this quiet sense of safety continues to settle a little deeper within you, you may begin to notice something very subtle happening in the way your body is responding to this moment. Almost as if it is finally receiving a message it has been waiting for all day long. A message that says you don't have to stay tense right now. You don't have to keep holding yourself together with constant effort. You don't have to remain in that quiet state of readiness where every muscle feels slightly prepared for something that isn't even happening in this moment. Because for so long, your body has learned to stay alert even in silence, to stay tight even in stillness, to stay guarded even when nothing is actually threatening you right now. And that kind of long-term tension becomes so normal that you stop noticing it until you finally slow down enough to feel what has been there underneath everything. And maybe right now, as you're listening in this quiet space, your shoulders might begin to drop just a little without you trying. Your jaw might soften without you realizing. Your breathing might become slightly deeper even without instruction. And that is not something you are forcing. It is something that is naturally happening when your system starts to recognize that it is safe enough to let go of unnecessary pressure. Because your body is not separate from your emotions, it has been carrying them with you, storing them quietly, responding to every thought, every worry, every moment of stress you've experienced today and even before today. And now, in this slower rhythm, it is finally being given permission to release what it has been holding. And as that release begins in its own gentle way, you may notice your mind still tries to stay active in the background, still bringing small thoughts forward, still attempting to organize everything that feels unfinished in your life. But something is different now. Those thoughts don't feel as heavy as they did before. They don't pull you in the same way. They don't carry the same urgency that once made them feel overwhelming. Instead, they begin to feel more like distant movements in the background of your awareness. Things you can notice, but don't have to follow. Things you can acknowledge, but don't have to become. And in that growing distance, There is a kind of quiet freedom forming inside you. A freedom that doesn't come from escaping your life or ignoring your responsibilities, but from no longer being controlled by every thought that passes through your mind. Because you are beginning to see something important here, that not every thought deserves your full emotional energy. Not every worry is asking to be solved right now, and not every possibility needs to be carried into your heart as if it is already happening. Some thoughts are just passing signals, temporary waves, and they don't define the depth of who you are or the stability of your future. And as you rest in that understanding a little longer, something even more peaceful begins to emerge underneath it all. A soft awareness that you are not required to hold everything at once in order for your life to continue moving forward. You don't need to mentally carry tomorrow while you are still in today. You don't need to rehearse every outcome to feel prepared. You don't need to stay in a constant state of inner effort just to make sure nothing falls apart. Because even in your stillness, even in your rest, life continues to be held in ways you cannot always see or control. And maybe this is where a deeper kind of trust begins to quietly grow within you. Not the kind of trust that demands understanding everything immediately, but the kind that allows you to breathe even when you don't have all the answers, the kind that allows you to rest even while things remain uncertain, the kind that reminds you that you are not alone in what you are carrying, even when it feels like no one else fully sees it. And as this thought settles gently into your heart, you may begin to feel that tonight is not about fixing your life, but about finally giving yourself permission to stop fighting against this moment and simply rest inside it. And as you continue resting in that gentle permission, something even deeper begins to unfold within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly stepping out of constant effort and entering a space where nothing needs to be forced anymore. Because so much of your life has likely been spent in subtle resistance, resisting stress, resisting uncertainty, resisting emotions that felt too heavy to fully process in the moment, and even resisting your own need for rest, because there always seemed to be something else that needed your attention first. And over time, that quiet resistance becomes exhausting in a way that is hard to explain, because it doesn't look like struggle on the outside, but it feels like constant pressure on the inside. But here, in this stillness, there is nothing you need to resist right now. Nothing is demanding your immediate reaction. Nothing is asking you to solve it before you can feel calm. And as that reality slowly becomes more present in your awareness, you may notice your mind beginning to loosen its grip just a little more, like it is no longer trying so hard to hold everything in place at once. The thoughts may still come, but they don't feel as sharp. The worries may still appear, but they don't feel as loud. And in that softening, you start to experience something very important. The difference between being inside your thoughts and simply being aware of them. And in that awareness, there is a quiet shift happening. A shift from control to observation, from tension to allowing, from carrying everything at once to simply letting each moment exist without interference. And you don't have to force this shift to happen. You don't have to try harder or think differently or become someone else in order to experience it. It is already unfolding naturally as you give yourself permission to stop struggling against the flow of this moment. And maybe this is what peace really begins to feel like. Not the absence of thoughts, not the removal of all uncertainty, but a softer relationship with everything that is happening inside you. A relationship where thoughts can pass without pulling you in, where emotions can rise without overwhelming you. where silence can exist without feeling empty or uncomfortable. And in that space, something steady begins to form. Underneath everything else, a quiet sense that you are still here, still held, still present, even when nothing feels perfectly figured out. And as you remain in this gentle awareness just a little longer, you may begin to sense that you don't need to hold yourself together so tightly anymore. Because even in your loosening, even in your resting, even in your letting go, nothing about your worth or your safety is being taken away from you. Instead, something is being returned to you. The simple experience of being able to exist without pressure, and that alone is enough for your heart to begin settling a little more deeply into rest. And as that deeper settling continues within you, you may begin to notice a very quiet kind of stillness forming underneath everything else. Almost like your inner world is finally finding a place where it doesn't have to keep racing anymore. Because when a mind has been used to carrying pressure for a long time, even small moments of calm can feel unfamiliar at first, as if something inside is waiting for the tension to return, waiting for the next thought to interrupt, waiting for the next wave of worry to appear. But right now, nothing is arriving to disturb you in this moment. And slowly, gently, your awareness begins to adjust to that truth. The need to stay mentally alert all the time starts to loosen its grip. The feeling that you must constantly monitor your thoughts begins to fade into the background. And in that fading, you may notice that your attention is no longer being pulled in so many directions at once. Instead, it starts to rest here, in this moment, in this breath, without needing to reach forward or go back to anything else. And in that simplicity, something very grounding begins to emerge, a quiet sense that you are allowed to exist without always being in problem-solving mode. You are allowed to pause without losing control of your life. You are allowed to stop mentally carrying everything for a while without everything falling apart. And as this begins to feel even slightly real inside you, there is a gentle easing in the way your inner world is holding itself. Because not every moment in life requires action. Not every thought requires response. Not every feeling requires immediate resolution. Some things are allowed to simply be present for a while without you needing to fix them in this exact moment. And when you begin to accept that, even in a small way, something softens inside you. A kind of inner permission you may not have given yourself often enough. Permission to rest without conditions. And maybe this is where your heart starts to feel something it has been quietly longing for. Not escape from life, but relief from carrying all of it at once. A sense that you can stay here, in this breath, without pressure, without urgency, without needing to mentally hold everything together. And in that quiet realization, even your thoughts begin to feel less like demands and more like passing movements, while you remain steady beneath them, slowly returning to a place of calm presence that has been within you all along. And as you continue to rest in this quieter space, something even more gentle begins to unfold within you. Almost like your entire inner world is slowly learning a new way of existing, a way that is not built on pressure, not built on urgency, and not built on the constant need to stay ahead of every possible outcome. Because for so long, your mind may have been functioning like it had to prepare for everything at once, always. Scanning, always anticipating, always trying to make sure nothing goes wrong. And even though that part of you may have developed with good intention to protect you, to help you, to keep you safe, it can also become exhausting when it never gets a chance to pause. But here, in this moment, Nothing is asking you to stay in that state of constant preparation. Nothing is demanding that you figure everything out right now. Nothing is requiring you to mentally rehearse every scenario just to feel safe. And as that realization slowly settles into your awareness, you may begin to feel a subtle but meaningful shift happening inside you. Like the mind is finally stepping back just a little, loosening its grip on the need to control every thought and every outcome all at once. And in that loosening, there is a quiet kind of relief that begins to spread gently through your awareness. Not because your life has suddenly become perfect or problem-free, but because you are no longer standing in the center of every thought with the same level of intensity. You are beginning to observe instead of absorb, notice instead of react, allow instead of resist. And that shift, even if it feels small, carries a deeper transformation within it, because it changes your relationship with everything you experience internally. And maybe this is where you start to understand something important in a very personal way. That peace was never meant to come only after everything is solved. Peace is not a reward waiting at the end of all your struggles. It is something that can exist alongside uncertainty, something that can sit quietly beneath unanswered questions, something that can remain steady even when life feels unclear. And as you begin to sense that truth, you may notice your breathing becoming a little softer again. Not because you are controlling it, but because your body is responding to the absence of pressure. And in that softness, your thoughts may still appear from time to time, but they begin to lose their weight. They begin to lose their urgency. They begin to feel less like commands and more like passing waves that rise and fall on their own. And you don't have to follow every one of them. You don't have to solve every one of them. You don't have to attach yourself to every one of them. You can simply let them move through your awareness while you remain here, grounded, present, and quietly held in something that feels steadier than the thoughts themselves. And as you stay with that steadiness just a little longer, you may begin to feel a deeper sense of permission forming inside you. Permission to stop mentally carrying everything at once. Permission to rest without needing to earn it. Permission to be here exactly as you are without pressure to change anything in this moment. And in that permission, there is a gentle unfolding, a softening of the inner tension that has been quietly shaping your experience for so long. Because you are not meant to live in constant internal effort. You are not meant to carry every possibility in your mind at the same time. And you are not meant to stay in a permanent state of readiness. And as that truth settles more deeply within you, something very calm begins to take root beneath everything else. A calm that does not depend on circumstances. A calm that does not require perfection. A calm that simply exists here with you now, gently reminding you that even in this moment, you are allowed to rest. And nothing about this moment is asking you to do more than simply be. And as you continue resting in this gentler awareness, something even quieter begins to settle beneath your thoughts. Almost like your inner world is finally learning that it does not have to stay in constant motion to feel safe. Because for so long, your mind may have believed that stillness equals vulnerability. That if you stop thinking for a moment, something might slip away, something might go wrong, something might not be handled in time. And without even realizing it, that belief can keep you mentally active even in moments when your body is trying to rest, always slightly on guard, always slightly prepared, always slightly tense. But here, in this moment, nothing is asking you to stay on guard. Nothing is requiring you to monitor every outcome. Nothing is demanding that you mentally stay ahead of life. And as that truth slowly becomes more present within your awareness, you may notice that your mind does not need to work as hard as it was before. The urgency begins to soften. The pressure begins to loosen. And in that loosening, there is a quiet kind of relief that doesn't come from solving anything, but from no longer carrying everything all at once in your awareness. And maybe this is where something very important begins to shift inside you, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeply subtle one. You start to realize that you are allowed to pause mentally without losing control of your life. You are allowed to step out of constant analysis without everything falling apart. You are allowed to let thoughts pass without engaging every single one of them. And in that realization, there is a growing sense of space opening within you, space where your mind is not tightly crowded with every worry at the same time, space where your emotions are not being constantly judged or controlled, space where you can simply be present without pressure. And in that space, something very natural begins to happen on its own. Your awareness starts to feel less entangled in your thoughts. Instead of being pulled into every direction they move, you begin to notice them from a little distance. And that distance is not cold or disconnected, it is calm. It is steady. It is the kind of awareness where you can see what is happening inside you without being consumed by it. And that alone can begin to change the emotional weight of everything you are experiencing. Because not every thought deserves your full attention. Not every worry deserves your full energy. Not every possibility deserves to be carried in your chest as if it is already happening. Some thoughts are just passing signals, temporary movements in the mind, and they do not define the truth of your life in this moment. And as you begin to see that more clearly, even slightly, something within you starts to relax. Not because life has become certain, but because you are no longer treating every uncertainty as something you must solve immediately. And in that relaxation, there is a quiet return happening, a return to yourself beneath the noise, a return to the part of you that is not defined by stress or urgency, a return to the awareness that simply observes everything without becoming overwhelmed by it. And as you stay here just a little longer, you may begin to feel that peace is not something far away from you. It is something that becomes visible the moment you stop resisting this moment and allow yourself, gently and fully, to rest inside it. And as you stay a little longer in this softer presence, something very quiet begins to deepen within you, almost like your entire inner world is slowly learning that it doesn't have to keep tightening around every thought to stay safe. Because so much of emotional exhaustion doesn't only come from what is happening in life, but from the constant inner reaction to what is happening, the constant interpreting, the constant preparing, the constant replaying of moments that are already gone or not even here yet. And that continuous inner activity can make even simple moments feel heavier than they actually are. But here, in this stillness, you are not required to stay in that level of mental effort. Nothing is asking you to analyze your life right now. Nothing is demanding that you mentally fix the past or secure the future in this moment. And as that truth gently settles into your awareness, you may notice that something inside you begins to shift, not because your circumstances have changed, but because your inner relationship with them is changing. And that shift, even if it feels subtle, is deeply meaningful because it changes the way you experience everything internally. And maybe this is where you begin to feel a new kind of space opening up within you, space where thoughts are allowed to come and go without pulling you, and space where emotions are allowed to be felt without becoming overwhelming, space where silence doesn't feel empty or uncomfortable, but instead feels steady and supportive. And in that space, you are no longer reacting to every thought as if it is urgent. You are simply noticing them and letting them pass, while you remain anchored in something calmer underneath it all. And in that anchoring, there is a gentle reminder slowly forming within you that you are not defined by the intensity of your thoughts. You are not defined by the worries that appear during stressful moments. You are not defined by the uncertainty you feel when life feels unclear. You are the one who notices all of these experiences, the one who remains present through all of them, the one who exists beneath all of them without being changed by their temporary presence. And as you begin to feel that truth more deeply, even in a small way, something inside you starts to feel less entangled in the emotional weight you were carrying. Because not every thought needs to be followed. Not every worry needs to be answered immediately. Not every feeling needs to be solved before you can rest. Some things are allowed to exist for a while without your intervention. Some things are allowed to move through you without being controlled. And in that understanding, there is a quiet kind of relief beginning to emerge, a relief that doesn't come from fixing everything, but from no longer holding everything at once. And as you rest in that realization just a little longer, you may begin to notice that your breathing feels a bit more natural again. Your inner world feels a bit less crowded, and your awareness begins to rest in a quieter place beneath all the mental activity. And in that place, there is nothing demanding your urgency, nothing requiring your control, nothing asking you to carry more than what is already here in this moment. And maybe this is where you begin to sense something deeper. That peace was never something distant or difficult to reach. It was always quietly available underneath the noise of overthinking, patiently waiting for you to slow down enough to notice that even here, even now, you are allowed to be held without needing to hold everything yourself. And as you continue resting in this quieter awareness, something very soft begins to unfold in a deeper layer of your being. Almost like your inner world is finally remembering what it feels like to stop resisting every moment as it comes. Because so much of daily life can quietly train the mind to stay in a constant state of doing more thinking, doing more planning, doing more worrying, doing more preparing, as if rest is only allowed after everything is perfectly under control. But in reality, life rarely offers that kind of perfect control, and yet your mind may still keep searching for it, trying to create safety through constant mental effort. But here, in this moment, you are not required to keep doing anything internally. You don't have to keep solving, fixing, predicting, or reviewing your life right now. And as that realization gently settles within you, you may begin to notice a subtle shift in your inner atmosphere, like the tightness that was once quietly present in the background is beginning to loosen, even if only slightly. And that slight loosening is enough to create space. Space where your awareness is no longer compressed by constant urgency. Space where your thoughts are no longer occupying every corner of your attention at once. And in that space, something very natural begins to happen. You start to see your thoughts more clearly for what they are: passing mental events, temporary movements in awareness, not commands that must be obeyed immediately, not warnings that define your reality, and not truths that require your full emotional reaction every time they appear. And in this recognition, even a small one, there is a quiet shift in how your inner world begins to organize itself. Less chaotic, less pressured, less entangled in every passing idea. And maybe this is where you begin to understand something in a very gentle way. That peace does not require the absence of thoughts. Peace is not about forcing your mind into silence or eliminating every worry from your experience. Instead, peace begins when you stop fighting the presence of those thoughts, when you stop tightening around them, when you allow them to exist without giving them the same weight they once had. And in that allowing, something opens, a kind of emotional space that feels lighter, even though nothing outside has changed. And as you remain in that openness just a little longer, you may begin to notice that your body is responding too. Not because you are telling it to relax, but because it is finally receiving the message that it does not need to stay in constant preparation mode. The breath may feel a bit slower, the chest a bit softer, the mind a bit less crowded than before. And all of this is happening naturally, without force, as your system slowly adjusts to the absence of pressure. And in that gentle adjustment, there is a quiet realization forming within you that you are not required to carry every emotional experience at its full intensity. You can feel things without being overwhelmed by them. You can notice thoughts without being pulled into them. You can remain present without being consumed by everything that passes through your mind. And as this begins to settle deeper, even subtly, you may start to feel that you are not trapped inside your inner world, but instead, you are the one gently observing it, steady, aware, and still here, resting in something much softer than the thoughts that once felt so loud. And as you continue resting in this softer awareness, something even more gentle begins to open within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly learning that it doesn't need to stay tightly wrapped around every emotion to feel safe. Because for so long, you may have been carrying things internally without even realizing how much space they were taking up, small worries layered on top of bigger ones, unspoken concerns sitting quietly in the background, thoughts that return again and again even when you try to move past them. And over time, that constant inner holding can begin to feel like a weight you don't fully notice until you finally slow down. But here, in this moment, there is no need to keep holding everything in the same way. Nothing is asking you to mentally organize your entire life right now. Nothing is requiring you to revisit every memory or solve every uncertainty before you can feel at ease. And as that gentle truth becomes more present in your awareness, you may start to feel something subtle shifting inside you. Like the edges of your thoughts are becoming less sharp, less demanding, less urgent than they were before. And in that softening, there is a quiet kind of relief that begins to spread through your awareness. Not because the world outside has changed, but because the way you are relating to your inner world is beginning to change. You are no longer standing in the center of every thought with the same intensity. You are beginning to step back just slightly, enough to observe without being overwhelmed, enough to notice without becoming consumed, enough to be present without being pulled in every direction at once. And maybe this is where you begin to feel a deeper kind of calm forming within you. A calm that does not depend on everything being solved. A calm that does not require certainty in every area of life. A calm that exists quietly underneath all the movement of thoughts and emotions. And even if it feels small at first, even if it feels unfamiliar, it is still real, still present, still gently supporting you in ways you may not fully notice yet. Because peace is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it arrives in the smallest moments of easing, the smallest pauses between thoughts, the smallest spaces where you realize you are not as tightly bound to your worries as you were a few minutes ago. And in those spaces, something very meaningful is happening. Your inner world is learning that it can exist without constant tension, that it can breathe without constant control, that it can rest without everything needing to be perfect first. And as you stay here just a little longer, you may begin to notice that even your sense of identity feels a bit less tied to everything you are thinking. You are not the worry itself. You are not the uncertainty itself. You are not the emotional weight that comes and goes. You are the awareness that holds all of it, the presence that remains steady even when everything else feels like it is shifting. And in remembering that, even quietly, there is a deep grounding that begins to form within you, a sense that you are not lost inside your thoughts, but gently observing them from a place that is calmer, wider, and more stable than anything they can create. And from that place, you may begin to feel something you didn't have to force at all, a quiet return to yourself, where nothing is required from you in this moment except to simply be here, and let this rest continue unfolding in its own gentle way. And as you remain in this gentle stillness, something even deeper begins to settle within you. Almost like your inner world is finally learning that it doesn't have to keep bracing for the next wave of thoughts or emotions. Because so often, without even realizing it, the mind develops a habit of staying slightly ahead of the present moment, always anticipating what might come next, always preparing for the next feeling, the next problem, the next responsibility. And while that constant anticipation may feel like control on the surface, inside it slowly creates a kind of fatigue that is difficult to describe in words. But here, in this moment, there is nothing you need to stay ahead of. Nothing is. Arriving that requires immediate mental preparation. Nothing is demanding that you stay in a constant state of internal alertness. And as that truth gently settles into your awareness, you may begin to notice a subtle shift happening in the way your thoughts move, like they are no longer rushing forward with the same intensity, no longer pulling you into every possible outcome, no longer creating the same pressure they once carried. And in that softening, something very quiet begins to open within you, a space where you are no longer reacting to every thought as if it defines your reality. Instead, you begin to see them as passing experiences, temporary movements within your awareness that do not require your full emotional involvement. And in that recognition, there is a gentle kind of relief, because it means you are no longer trapped inside every mental narrative that appears. You can notice them and still remain grounded beneath them. And maybe this is where you begin to feel a deeper stability forming inside you. Not a stability that comes from controlling everything around you, but a stability that comes from no longer needing to control everything within you. Because there is a difference between being aware of your thoughts and being controlled by them. And as you rest here a little longer, you may begin to sense that difference more clearly, like a quiet distance forming between you and the intensity of your inner world. And in that distance, there is space, space to breathe without pressure, space to feel without overwhelm, space to simply exist without constantly evaluating what you are experiencing. And that space is not empty in a negative way. It is open, calm, and steady, like a soft background where your awareness can rest without being pulled in every direction. And maybe this is what your heart has been searching for all along. Not more answers, not more effort, not more mental control, but this simple experience of being here without resistance. A moment where you are not trying to fix yourself or your thoughts or your emotions. A moment where you are simply allowed to be present without carrying everything at once. And as you continue resting in that presence, you may begin to notice that even your sense of time feels a little slower now, like everything is gently unfolding instead of rushing forward. And in that slower rhythm, there is a quiet reassurance growing within you that you don't need to hold everything tightly for things to be okay. You can loosen your grip, you can breathe, and you can allow this moment to carry you in a way that feels softer than everything you were holding before. And as you continue resting in this slower, softer rhythm, something very gentle begins to deepen within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly realizing that it does not need to stay in constant effort to remain safe or steady. Because for so long, you may have been operating from a place of quiet tension, a place where even in rest, part of your mind stayed slightly active, slightly alert, slightly prepared for what might go wrong next. And over time, that quiet inner alertness can become so familiar that you don't even recognize it as stress anymore. It just becomes the background of your everyday experience. But here, in this moment, nothing is asking you to stay in that state of readiness. Nothing is requiring you to mentally hold everything together. Nothing is demanding that you anticipate every outcome or solve every uncertainty right now. And as that truth gently settles within your awareness, you may begin to notice a very subtle change happening in the way your thoughts feel, like they are no longer pressing against you with the same weight, no longer pulling you into the same urgency, no longer demanding your full attention all at once. And in that easing, there is a quiet unfolding within you, a kind of inner space beginning to open where everything does not feel so tightly packed anymore. Thoughts may still appear, emotions may still move through, but they no longer define the entire atmosphere of your inner world. Instead, they become part of a wider awareness, something you can observe without being consumed by it, something you can notice without needing to react to it immediately. And in that space, there is a gentle return happening, a return to presence, a return to simplicity, a return to the quiet awareness that has always been underneath everything else. And maybe this is where you begin to feel something very important. That peace is not something you have to reach for or create through effort. It is something that becomes visible when you stop resisting this moment as it is. When you stop tightening around your thoughts, when you stop trying to mentally fix everything before allowing yourself to rest. And in that letting go, even if it happens gradually, something inside you begins to soften in a way that feels deeply natural, almost like your inner world is finally exhaling after holding itself for too long. And as you stay here just a little longer, you may notice that your awareness is no longer caught in every direction at once. Instead, it begins to settle, to center, to rest in something quieter than the noise of thinking. And in that centeredness, there is a sense of stability forming that does not depend on external circumstances. It is a stability that exists within your ability to simply observe your experience without becoming overwhelmed by it. And maybe this is what your soul has been needing more than anything else tonight. Not more answers, not more effort, not more control, but this gentle experience of being present without pressure. A space where nothing is required from you except to breathe, to soften, and to allow yourself to be held by a calm that does not demand anything in return. And as this realization settles within you, even quietly, you may begin to feel that you are already closer to rest than you thought, simply by being here, simply by allowing this moment to be enough. And as you continue resting in this quieter awareness, something even more subtle begins to unfold within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly learning that it does not need to stay tightly wrapped around every single thought to remain safe or in control. Because for so long, your mind may have been operating in a kind of silent habit of overengagement, always leaning into thoughts as soon as they appear, always trying to interpret them, analyze them, prepare for them, or emotionally respond to them before they even fully settle. And over time, that constant engagement creates a kind of inner exhaustion that doesn't always feel like tiredness in the usual sense, but more like a deep mental weight that quietly follows you everywhere. But here, in this moment, there is nothing asking you to engage with everything that arises inside your mind. Nothing is requiring you to solve, fix, or fully understand every thought that comes and goes. And as that truth gently settles into your awareness, you may begin to notice a soft shift happening in how you experience your inner world, like you are no longer stepping into every thought, as if it is an urgent message that must be acted upon immediately. Instead, there is a little more space, a little more distance, a little more calm observation beginning to form naturally. And in that space, something very important begins to emerge. The realization that you are not obligated to participate in every thought you have. Thoughts can appear without needing your full attention. Worries can arise without requiring your full emotional energy. Memories can surface without needing to pull you back into them completely. And in that understanding, there is a gentle relief, because it means you are no longer fully entangled in everything happening inside your mind. You are beginning to experience the possibility of simply noticing without absorbing, witnessing without reacting, being aware without being overwhelmed. And maybe this is where something deeper begins to settle within you. A sense that your awareness is larger than your thoughts. That you are not confined inside the boundaries of what your mind is producing in any given moment. You are the space in which all of these experiences arise, and that space does not get damaged by what passes through it. It remains steady even when thoughts are loud, even when emotions are strong, even when uncertainty feels close. And as you begin to sense that stability, even faintly, there is a quiet grounding forming underneath everything else. And in that grounding, you may notice your breathing becoming slightly more natural again, not controlled, not forced, just gently unfolding on its own rhythm. And with each breath, there is a soft reminder that you are here, in this moment, not in the past, not in the future, not in every possible outcome your mind tries to simulate, but here, present, alive, and allowed to rest without needing to carry everything at once. And as this awareness continues to deepen within you, you may begin to feel that peace is not something distant or difficult to reach, but something that naturally reveals itself when you stop resisting the moment you are already in. And in that simple realization, there is a quiet kind of freedom forming within you, a freedom from constant mental pressure, a freedom from over-identifying with every thought, and a freedom to simply exist in this space without needing anything more than what is already here right now. And as you continue resting in this quieter sense of awareness, something even more grounding begins to settle within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly realizing that it does not need to stay in constant tension to stay safe or in control. Because for so long, You may have been living in a way where even rest didn't feel like full rest, where part of your mind stayed slightly active in the background, always checking, always thinking, always trying to make sure nothing is slipping away. And over time, that quiet background effort becomes so normal that you stop noticing how much energy it takes from you. But here, in this moment, there is nothing asking you to maintain that level of inner effort. Nothing is demanding that you stay mentally alert for every possible outcome. Nothing is requiring you to solve or prepare for anything right now. And as that reality gently becomes more present in your awareness, you may begin to notice a soft unwinding happening within your thoughts, like the pressure that once held them tightly in place is beginning to ease slowly, naturally, without force. And in that easing, there is a very quiet shift taking place, where your mind is no longer gripping every thought with the same urgency. Thoughts may still come, but they begin to feel less like instructions and more like passing impressions. They rise, they move, they fade, and you remain here, not pulled into every one of them the way you were before. And that alone begins to create a subtle but meaningful sense of relief inside you. Because when you are no longer fully entangled in every thought, there is suddenly more room inside your awareness, room to breathe, room to notice, room to simply exist without constant mental pressure. And in that room, something very soft begins to emerge, a sense of steadiness that does not depend on controlling everything around you or inside you. It is a steadiness that comes from simply being present without resistance, from allowing thoughts to pass, without holding on to them, from recognizing that you do not need to react to everything your mind produces. And maybe this is where you begin to feel a deeper kind of calm forming within you. Not because your life has become perfectly organized or free of uncertainty, but because you are no longer carrying all of that uncertainty in the same way you were before. It is still there, but it is no longer sitting so heavily in the center of your experience. It is no longer defining the entire atmosphere of your inner world. Instead, it becomes something you can observe from a quieter place within yourself. And in that quieter place, there is a gentle reminder slowly unfolding that you are not required to hold everything at once in order for things to be okay. You are not required to mentally manage every outcome. You are not required to stay in a constant state of inner effort just to feel safe. And as that understanding begins to settle more deeply within you, something begins to soften even further, a release of pressure you may not have realized you were still carrying. And as you rest here just a little longer, you may begin to notice that peace is not something you have to chase or create through effort. It is something that becomes visible when you stop tightening around your thoughts, when you stop resisting this moment, when you allow yourself to simply be here without needing to fix anything at all. And in that simple presence, there is a quiet kind of freedom beginning to grow within you, a freedom that gently reminds you that even now, even here, you are allowed to rest. And as you continue resting in this quieter freedom, something very gentle begins to deepen within you. Almost like your inner world is slowly learning that it doesn't need to stay in constant motion in order to stay safe. Because for so long, you may have been living with a kind of invisible pressure, a pressure to always stay ahead, to always be prepared, to always think through everything before it even happens. And that way of living, even when it feels responsible or necessary, can slowly turn into a quiet kind of exhaustion that sits underneath everything you do. But here, in this moment, Nothing is asking you to stay ahead of anything. Nothing is requiring you to mentally solve tomorrow tonight. Nothing is demanding that you carry the weight of every possible outcome in your awareness at the same time. And as that truth gently settles into your experience, you may begin to notice something subtle beginning to change in the way your thoughts feel, like they are no longer pressing against you with the same intensity they once had. And in that softening, there is a quiet shift happening within your awareness, where thoughts are still present, but they are no longer taking up the entire space of your attention. They are no longer pulling you into every direction at once. Instead, they begin to feel lighter, more distant, less demanding of your immediate response. And in that distance, there is a growing sense of relief, because you are no longer fully inside every thought as it appears. You are beginning to see them, notice them, and let them move on without needing to follow each one. And maybe this is where something very important begins to open within you. The realization that your mind is not something you are trapped inside of. It is something you are aware of. Thoughts can arise without defining you. Emotions can move through without consuming you. Worries can appear without becoming your reality in this moment. And in that awareness, there is a quiet kind of grounding that begins to form. A steady sense that you are still here, still present, still safe enough in this moment to simply observe everything without being pulled into it. And as you stay with that grounding just a little longer, you may begin to notice your breathing becoming softer again. Not because you are trying to control it, but because your system is slowly responding to the absence of pressure. The body begins to relax in its own way. The mind begins to slow in its own rhythm. And everything starts to settle into a more natural flow where nothing is being forced or rushed. And in that natural flow, there is a quiet realization gently unfolding. That peace does not require everything in your life to be solved first. Peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. Peace is something that can exist even in the middle of uncertainty, even in the presence of unanswered questions, even when life feels unfinished. And as that truth settles within you, even quietly, you may begin to feel that you are already closer to rest than your thoughts were telling you, simply because you have allowed yourself to stop resisting this moment and begin allowing it to be exactly as it is. And now, as this journey gently reaches its final moments, there is nothing more you need to process, nothing more you need to analyze, and nothing more you need to hold in your mind. You can allow everything that has been on your heart tonight to slowly settle, to soften, and to take its place in a space where it no longer has to be carried alone by your thoughts. Because you were never meant to live in a constant state of inner pressure, never meant to hold every answer at once, never meant to stay in control of everything just to feel okay. And even now, in this quiet ending moment, that truth remains just as gentle and just as real as it was in the beginning. You are allowed to rest without earning it, without proving it, without needing anything else to change first. And as you prepare to let go and to sleep, let your breathing become even slower, even softer, as if each breath is gently guiding you deeper into a place of calm that does not depend on your circumstances. Whatever thoughts are still lingering, you don't need to carry them into the night. You can place them down gently, without fear, trusting that not everything needs your attention right now, and not everything needs to be solved before your eyes close. Some things can wait, some things can rest, and you are safe enough to let them be held by God while you rest. Because tonight, you are being reminded of something very sacred, that you are not alone in what you carry. You never were. Even in your most silent moments, even in your most tired prayers, even in the thoughts you never fully spoke out loud. God has seen you. God has known you. And God has been with you in ways you may not have fully realized. And as you release the weight of this day, even just a little more, you are not losing control. You are surrendering into care, into love, into a presence that does not sleep and does not leave. So now, gently imagine placing every worry, every unanswered question, every heavy thought into His hands, not as a ritual, but as a quiet act of trust. And feel how something inside you softens when you stop trying to carry what was never meant to stay on your shoulders alone. There is peace in that surrender, a peace that does not depend on answers, but on His faithfulness. And as you drift into sleep, may your heart rest in this final truth. You are deeply loved by God. You are held even in your rest. And you are not forgotten in any part of your story. May Jesus Christ surround your mind with peace, quiet your thoughts with His presence, and give you a deep, healing sleep tonight. And if this message has brought even a small comfort to your heart, feel free to return anytime, because His peace is always available, and His arms are always open for you. Amen.